Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Pat Fitzmuaice and by Jake Ciely. Guys, we were running it back. Just a week ago, we sat here and we talked about running backs that we wanted to draft in every round, going through the first 12 rounds and early thoughts about 2025 drafts. We're doing the same exact thing today with the same exact crew. We're talking wide receivers. We're going to mix up the order a little bit. Last time we gave the odd numbered rounds to Jake, so he got first overall pick. Fitz now. We'll get kind of those odd rounds, and Jake will get the even ones. Before we dive in, though, Jake, anything you got going on at The Athletic?
Yeah, nothing. You have to wait for a little bit. The pre-draft rookies fantasy comps. Like I don't try to do what everybody else does and be like, hey, this player is this player, because we're trying to make it easy for everybody. But I like to do it from a fantasy spin. But I have to wait for the great Dane Brugler because he has to come out first. So you're gonna get mine a few days later, which is probably around the 13th or the 14th. But that's so you got a little brevity. But I was gonna say more the fact that like Pat missed the memo to have like the reddish orange kind of look kind of going today.
Yeah, what the heck?
Not my best color. Jake, when does Dane drop the monster? Is that coming soon? I mean, that's a lot to read in just 4 weeks or so.
It's the 8th or the 9th. So yeah, it is actually next week.
Yeah, Dane Brugler does an amazing job with that. Phenomenal draft guide and kind of a must read if you're a draft Nick.
It does feel like that time of year. Like we've obviously been talking draft in the Dynasty show for a while. We've been sprinkling in some rookies into these conversations for a couple of weeks, but now, of course, we are recording this on April 1st, so calendar has flipped. It is the month of the draft, so it just kind of feels that much closer and very exciting, and just a matter of being a few weeks away. Quick reminder for everybody before we dive into the episode that all of our 2025 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. All right, these are our round-by-round wide receivers to draft. Fitz, start us off with round one.
Yeah, I was tempted to go Jamar Chase here because I do think he deserves to be the 101 in one QB leagues, but not everyone will be able to draft Jamar Chase. Brian Thomas Jr., on the other hand, he's going to be available in the latter part of the first round. Some people might be a little uneasy about spending a first-round pick on a guy who's only done it for 1 year and doesn't really play in a top offense. But man, BTJ was pretty convincing last year. 87 catches for 1,282 yards and 10 touchdowns, 2.45 yards per route run, which ranks sixth among all receivers last year with at least 25 catches. And Brian Thomas Jr. kept pretty good company in the yards per route run category, only behind Puka Nacua, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, and Mike Evans, and just ahead of Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Had this fabulous rookie season despite Trevor Lawrence missing 7 games. And in fact, Brian Thomas Jr.'s production actually picked up with Mac Jones at quarterback. BTJ had 7 or more catches and 86 or more receiving yards in each of his last 5 games, all with Mac Jones at QB. He was just terrific for fantasy managers down the stretch and in the fantasy playoffs. And ultimately, I think seeing is believing. Like BTJ is just really good at getting open, makes tough catches, doesn't drop many, makes good yardage after the catch. In fact, I think he was 5th in yards after the catch last year. And now there's some reason for some cautious optimism about the Jacksonville offense with Liam Cohen coming in as head coach, presided over a pretty good Buccaneers offense last season, and maybe he can be the guy who finally fully taps the potential of Trevor Lawrence. So yeah, I like Brian Thomas Jr. toward the back end of the first round. I don't think his impressive rookie season was a fluke in any way.
Jake, what is the point that you're looking to draft Thomas? Because I think this has been a very common refrain that there are a lot of reasons for excitement. I'm totally with Fitz on basically everything he laid out. Is he somebody that you're considering like as soon as like the middle of the first round? Is it really more like you'd like to pair him with a running back early round 2, get him late in the first round? What's that kind of exact range you're looking at for him?
I would love the end of the first round. If you go by kind of early consensus, he's kind of around that 11th, 12th pick. I have him as high as 9. I have him right behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have him in front of Nico Collins, which is funny because I drew a lot of comparisons to Nico Collins when we came out of college last year. And my biggest argument, and this is why I love this pick, is basically where I'm going with this. If I had the first round pick, I would have said the same thing. I have him in front of Malik Neighbors, and I love Malik Neighbors. But going to last year's draft, I said, like, Brian Thomas deserves kind of like a tier 1.5. Like, he's kind of like right there, like almost just as good. And you can almost argue he's there with him, similar to when we talked about last week when I was talking about Trey Henderson. It's like any other year, he would have been tier 1. It just happened to be like we had this gift of amazing talent coming out. And as Fitz said, with and without Trevor Lawrence, with Mac Jones, what he's been able to do in that offense, I know people are concerned that they bring in another option, but what they've done so far tells me that they might not be too aggressive in the draft. But I mean, they could shock us in round one. They go and grab maybe I would be surprised if McMillan's still there, but or so I guess that would be round two because they're picking super early. They would have to get McMillan with the first pick. So anyway, point being is like if they did something like that, maybe I would slide him back into round two. But I just think with all their other needs that I just don't see him going that route. And it comes down to Brian Thomas's talent, as everything Fitz said. I mean, we're talking about top 10 in everything, target share, yards per route. Like he went down the list. I don't need to echo it.
Fitz, just, in looking at kind of this range, obviously there's 3 running backs that are going inside the top 5. Outside of them, it's all wide receivers and this is in our early 2025 rankings, like I mentioned, up through the first 11 picks. Outside of those 3 running backs, it's all receivers. And there is a stretch from pick 6 through pick 11, again, in our early rankings. So this could be subject to change, where it's wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Thomas is currently last at the end of those rankings behind the guys that Jake just mentioned, and, Nico and Neighbors and, Puka, Amon-Ra, obviously the big 3 at the top. But do you think that when we get to August, it will still look like that? Or do you think we will see helium for Thomas and moving ahead of those other receivers like Jake already has it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot depends, as Jake mentioned, on what we see the Jaguars do, whether they add to that wide receiver core, maybe add something at tight end, although I kind of think that's unlikely. But so it's a possibility. I think there's going to be a division about whether people prefer Brian Thomas Jr. or Nico. I could see a big split over that. And for some, including possibly me, like I'm not sure how I feel about Amon-Ra this year because we already saw him start to get a little bit of a target haircut last year with the emergence of Jamison Williams. And now no more Ben Johnson. So like, I don't know. We saw Amon-Ra like sort of make up for the fewer targets with extra touchdowns last year. But like I think his value is maybe a little more fragile than it has been in the past. I still think he's like, a solid late first rounder at worst, but I'm not so sure he deserves to be a mid second rounder. And I think you could actually make a case for Brian Thomas Jr. over Amon-Ra this year.
Jake, let's go to round 2.
Yeah, round 2. I felt like the easy one was Drake London. Like that's just the obvious one. And we talk about the target share with Penix, and it was number 1 in the league. I mean, we're talking about almost 40% target share. So obviously, I don't know if we're going to expect that over an entire season, but 30+%, sure. So I was like, let's do a little less obvious if we're not going to talk Drake London for everybody. And it's Tyreek Hill for me. And I'm way over consensus as of right now. I don't have him in front of Drake London. I have him behind him. I have him late second round. But at late second round, I'm getting a guy that just 2 years ago we're talking about in the conversation for the number 1 wide receiver. Last year's drafts, as we were doing this last year, he was in the conversation to be the number 1 pick in fantasy because of what he just came off of with the Dolphins. And I don't want to say 2024 is completely thrown in the trash. We do have to acknowledge there are some issues that might carry over into 2025 for the Dolphins. But the biggest thing, as we see, is the league adjusts to teams. Leagues adjust to offenses. Leagues adjust to what you're doing. And the league said, you know what? We're just going to sit back and keep everything underneath when we face the Dolphins, and they're going to have to do everything after the catch. And between the effectiveness of the offense not getting out of the gate like expected because of that, Tua's injuries, again, the quarterback play, Jalen Waddle not being out there, just the litany of problems you could go down the list. I mean, they're in the top 5 with the 49ers of things that went wrong in 2024. I think there's better. And if I'm going to take a chance on somebody in the second round who could get back into the first round value, it's Tyreek Hill, because I still think that even, yes, he's 31, but he just turned 31. I still think there's a lot left if you watched him play last year at times too. Not 100% through a few of those games, wasn't the entire season, but there was a few little nickups there where he wasn't even 100%. I think there's a lot of room for him to come back and get late first round value to put his name back in the conversation. Not again, I wouldn't put him in that tier 1, but in the conversation with the Nico Collins and the Brian Thomases and Malik Neighbors. And if so, if he gets that, then I'm going to take him late round 2 every single time.
Fitz, what do you think about this one? If I remember correctly, you were very high on Tyreek last year. I think you had him as like your number 2 player, if I remember correctly in your rankings. And I remember talking with you last year about how I just get a little bit nervous with a guy whose, skill set is so dependent on, to be elite is that crazy speed as he gets into his 30s. He's, of course, now 31, coming off of this relative down season. So what do you think about Jake picking him here for a round 2 receiver?
So I'm thinking that it's not necessarily a case of Tyreek Hill getting older and losing anything off his fastball, because I don't think that's the case, which makes me sort of eager to maybe bet on a bounce back. There were all these like circumstances that sort of weighted down Tyreek last year, including obviously the complete dysfunction of the Miami offense when Tua was hurt, with Tyler Huntley and Skylar Thompson, and how ugly that offense looked at the time, and how just um, every week in the weekly fantasy rankings, I kept ranking Tyreek like 10 to 20 spots higher than he should have been ranked. I just couldn't bring myself to sufficiently drop him in the rankings. But does that change this year? Because it seemed like after Tua came back, there was this concerted effort to not have him take deep drops. It didn't help that the offensive line didn't play well last year. And will the Dolphins make a good faith effort in the draft to make repairs to that offensive line and give Tua the time to find Tyreek on those deeper routes where he can, rack up fantasy points in a hurry? So part of it, I guess I still want to see the Dolphins do more to address that O-line before I'm totally comfortable. But man, when you, as Jake said, if Tyreek is falling to the back of the second, and maybe you've started with like Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley in the first round, getting Tyreek at the 2-3 turn is pretty appealing at that point.
Where did you say, Fitz, where do you have him ranked?
Oh, I think right now I've got him at the back end of wide receiver 1 range.
Okay. He's wide receiver 12 in consensus right now, so that aligns
I'm in
with
line
that.
with that.
I want to remind everybody that if you're ready to win real money this April, but struggling to choose which team will pull off an upset, you can forget about the teams. All you need to focus on are player stats to rack up big cash prizes with DraftKings Pick 6. And when it comes to massive payouts, DraftKings dunks all over the competition. Pick 6 is available in most states, including Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and more. Track your picks for a shot to win huge cash prizes. It's as simple as that. Turn your college basketball knowledge into cash today. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly with just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to play $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, Fitz, sticking with you for round 3. Who you got here?
So I double checked, and I do have Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 12, directly behind the guy I'm going to mention as a round 3 value, a guy who has an ECR of wide receiver 13, 29 overall, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And JSN had a big time second year breakout last year, 100 catches, 1,130 yards, 6 touchdowns. And that was despite a somewhat sluggish start to the season. Smith-Njigba had 53 or fewer yards in 6 of his first 7 games. And that included a 9-yard game and a 19-yard game. He only scored 1 touchdown in his first 8 games. But then JSN just caught fire down the stretch. He had a 7-game run in November and December where he had at least 74 receiving yards in every game. And because, JSN just became this big-time target earner and a high-volume receiver, and now he doesn't have to compete for targets with DK Metcalf anymore, with Metcalf in Pittsburgh. So I realize there's still some concerns about JSN's usage, how much new play caller Clint Kubiak is going to use JSN in the slot now that the Seahawks have signed Cooper Kupp, who also does his best work in the slot. But look, I'm not that worried about how an aging Cooper Kupp is going to affect JSN's production. Obviously, their career arcs are headed in very opposite directions. Yes, I'm slightly worried about the possibility of JSN taking fewer slot snaps, but he's still a really good bet to return value if you can get him where ECR currently has him as a mid-third rounder.
Jake, what do you think about, I'm curious how you feel about JSN overall, but specifically what Fitz was saying, having him right ahead of Tyreek Hill. What do you think about those two head-to-head?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that we talked about that because today I tweeted out that we were talking about the Andy Dalton thing. And I'm sure you guys saw on Twitter today about calling Stur Sanders Andy Dalton. I was like, I hate player comps for this because no player is exactly another player. I said, but I do the same thing for fantasy. I just talked. That's what I'm doing for my article. But it's funny. I'm saying that to say I smashed JSN to get. I like doing smash ups, and mine for him was Keenan St. Brown. Keenan Allen and Monron St. Brown. Like you kind of combine the two, and he's Keenan St. Brown. And I think that's why, like, I really like this. I actually have him just almost, I was going to say, Fitz almost cheated on my list because I am at 25, almost in the second round, because I'm fully on board with him with that. I know a lot of people are concerned about Darnold and the offensive line and what he looks like when he has no time in the pocket and how he falls apart under pressure. But the thing that I do like is when Fitz brought up the fact that a lot of people are also concerned about the slot work, I'm not as concerned, not only because I think he can succeed outside, but I think Cooper Kupp at this point of his career, he's amazing at getting open, but now he's amazing at getting open because he's smart. He's not exactly the explosive get open super quick like he used to be. And that's something to go back to the Amon-Ra St. Brown, Keenan Allen earlier in his career, that JSN does really well. So I do think if Sam Darnold is under pressure and does panic, I think St. Brown, Smith-Njigba might be the one that he turns to quicker than Kupp. So I'm with Fitz 100% on this one as well. I told him before we did this show, I love his list. I've seen all the picks, and I just love his list today.
Yeah, we when we were kind of playing the show and putting our names together yesterday, there was definitely a lot of like, yep, I agree. We're on board with that. So not gonna be too much natural disagreement on today's episode when we agree with this. Would you consider either of you JSN like with a late second round pick if you just feel like he's not going to get back to you in the third round and you really want him? Is he somebody you're willing to plant your flag on in that sense and take him even earlier than you have him ranked? Either of you?
Oh, yeah. If depending on what's on the board, like if we're sitting here because you're talking about consensus and you're saying like Irving, Cook, I'm trying to think like a couple more running backs are still on the board. Achane, they're like running backs are sliding back. I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with one of those 3 or 4 if my third pick in the third round, but I want to make sure I get JSN and don't see him like just go a pick before me. That's kind of like the Tyreek Hill at the end of the second round. Like, why try to push your luck in getting him into the third? If you want your guy, you want your guy, and I'm okay with that.
What do you think?
Yeah, same way Jake feels about that. I have him 27th overall, so maybe it depends. Looking at the people sitting with the first and second overall pick, what do they have after one round? Who do I think they might be more likely to leave on the table for me coming back in the third round? So possibly, yeah, I might jump him ahead of like one of the running backs I'd consider there.
Jake, let's go to round 4. This is somebody that, like I just said, pulling back the curtain, we were talking about names. The very first name you said was you don't care which rounds you're picking as long as you get this guy.
I did. And then, but I also, as a caveat, as we're recording this on April 1st, I saw the news this morning too that said, hoping week 1 now. This was not hoping week 1 for this player just 24 hours ago. And that was Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin in the 4th is a steal if he's 100% in round 1. Like, this is egregious to be in the 4th round. This is somebody who, by the way, when he got hurt last year, was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, ahead of Chase, ahead of Jefferson, ahead of everybody else. And do I think he's going to be number 1 again? Probably not. But he's back with Baker Mayfield. I don't think they're going to overhaul this offense just because Cohen's gone. They know it works with Baker, and Baker's probably tired of having the offense changed on him so much throughout his career anyway. But you just kind of got the band back together. So as long as he's healthy and we're there in week 1, I would honestly have him aside my top 15 wide receivers. I would take him before Mike Evans if I know he's 100% week 1. So just in case that doesn't happen, I'll just throw out just a disclaimer like, okay, you're watching this 2 months from now and it's like, oh, Jake, heads up, he's not ready until week 4. Devonta Adams with the Rams, that's your easy pivot if you're in round 4.
Yeah, I love the pivot, just for the record, on Devonta Adams. I totally agree with you there. I wonder where he's going to end up being on draft day. But as far as Godwin goes, Fitz, what do you think about him and the idea of maybe even him over Evans if health is permitting?
No to the Godwin over Evans. I'm not going that way. And
we disagree.
Jake dropped the disclaimer about the Godwin injury thing, and yeah, I mean, I think I decided during that Monday night game when I saw Godwin's foot basically dangling like that I was probably not going to be he wasn't going to be in a lot of my teams in 2025. Not that he's like so old that he can't overcome a dislocated ankle, but I mean, there are some other factors that play here too. The change in play caller, not a huge needle mover, but just something that might shake confidence a little. The emergence of Jalen McMillan last year, not that he's going to overtake Godwin, but like he was pretty good, and now they've got a legitimate 3-man wide receiver core. And maybe the big one, like Baker Mayfield just shattered his previous high in career touchdowns by like 12 or 13, I think. And I don't know if he's going to be able to keep up that sort of pace. There might be some natural regression there due. So I'm not really targeting Chris Godwin this early, which saddens me because like Godwin in some years has been like my absolute favorite wide receiver target. But right now, I just don't think the price quite matches what I think the value is, and I think there's a little more risk than you normally get with Chris Godwin, who's been pretty reliable.
So full disclosure, my internet was cutting out while you were answering that, so I apologize if you said this already. I know you said that you disagree on the idea of like Godwin over Evans, possibly Fitz. Do you disagree with him in the 4th round also?
I think it's a little high for me personally.
Okay. Jake, is this something where like you feel like do you feel like you're going out on a limb with Godwin and you're like really planting a flag on him, or do you think the consensus will be more aligned with you than they are with Fitz?
I think it gets, again, depending on health. But I think the consensus will come around to make it closer. I feel like I'll probably still be the highest. I mean, as of right now, I'm plus 13 over consensus. I have Godwin at 16 in front of Adams, Evans, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson to go down from there. So I am clearly way far ahead on everybody else. But again, we are talking today. We are talking right now. And honestly, the good thing is that if you are drafting right now today, any of these offseason leagues, you don't have to. That's the biggest thing. It's like, I want to preach this, and I know Fitz and everybody on this network does the same thing. Just because I have him there doesn't mean you have to take him there. Like, I would take him in round 4, expecting this to move by the time we get to August if he's 100%. Round 4, he'll probably be plus 3 or 4 in consensus if he's 100%. Right now, knowing he's plus 13, that means you could probably wait till round 5 or even 6 and get him in your drafts right now. So just because I'm on him doesn't mean like, oh, go draft him in round 4 and take all that risk that you have to absorb as of today.
Godwin's ADP is probably going to be more sensitive to August news than that of just about any other player, I would think.
Fitz, let's go to round 5.
All right, let's go with Devonta Smith, who has an ECR of wide receiver 28 and 58 overall. One of the best route runners in football. Very good after the catch. And after finishing with more than 1,000 yards in 2022 and 2023, fell short of that mark in 2024, but only because he missed 4 games. Devonta Smith's per game production was pretty much right in line with where it had been during those 1,000-yard seasons. And he actually ramped up his touchdown production. 7 TDs in both 2022 and 2023, 8 touchdowns last year in only 13 games. Smith has averaged 9.1 yards per target and 1.92 yards per route run for his career, both very good numbers. And I don't really care that Devonta Smith has to share targets with A.J. Brown, and I don't really care that the Eagles' offense has been so run-heavy because Smith is putting up consistently good numbers even with those circumstances in place. And if the Philly offense were to become slightly less run-heavy, or if A.J. Brown were to miss time, Smith's value could really spike. So even if nothing changes, he's a safe investment, and there are potentially circumstances that could spike his value. Plus, he's just entering his prime. I think he's a pretty good and pretty rock-solid investment in the 5th round.
Jake, Smith in round 5?
I'm okay with it. I don't think it's mispriced at all. I think there's a perfect spot for him. I actually have him at wide receiver 27, so I'm kind of in line with the whole consensus. And the biggest thing, I was just kind of looking up the list right now. More points per game with the missed time, obviously, but more points per game than Garrett Wilson, Jackson, Smith-Njigba, and you can go down the list from there. More than DJ Moore, DK Metcalf. Like, these are some big names that people will want to take in front of them because they might be the number 1 or they might see the target volume that they hope. Zay Flowers all the way down at almost 2 points per game fewer than Devonta Smith, and everybody loves to take some Zay Flowers. So I think the point being is that he deserves to be in the conversation with these same names. But the good news, and why I do like the pick a lot by Fitz for this, because you're probably getting him around later than most all of those names I throw out.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at the consensus rankings, just seeing some of the other receiver names around him. Like, he's 1 spot at receiver. Godwin is in that conversation, but he's like a couple spots ahead of Jalen Waddle, who's also number 2. Didn't have the best season last year. Jordan Addison, also a number 2. Chris Olave has the injury stuff. Xavier Worthy and Rashid Rice are in that range. Jameson Williams. Like, Smith looks pretty enticing compared to a lot of those names. I would say for sure. I do want to remind everybody that you can join our Fantasy Pros Discord community, chat with other fans, and get access to exclusive AMAs that wind up on our podcast feed. Our current schedule looks like this: myself and Fitz at 5 Eastern on the first Tuesday of each month, and then Fitz and Boggs at 5 Eastern on the last 3 Tuesdays in April. That's the 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Come get your questions answered and be on the show at fantasypros.com/chat. All right, Jake, I kind of alluded to some of the rookies earlier. Let's get into one of them here for round 6.
Yeah, this is another one that, depending on August in this offseason, I could see that you're not going to be able to get him in a couple months here, if, as expected. Like, as a quick aside before we get really deep into Ted McMillan, is that I love and hate this offseason while we're waiting for the draft, because we get these people that like overthink and nothing's played, nothing's happened, and they're like moving up and down. I was like, they just got tired of McMillan for some reason. It's like, he was the consensus number 1. He was clearly the best wide receiver. He wasn't even healthy. Like, there's a good argument that he wasn't healthy for half the season, like 100% healthy. Like, he was playing through the injury that he got earlier in the year. And you go back to 2023, which was why he was the number 1, is like that season where he just dominated. And I'll throw out a name that he basically did last year, even possibly not being 100%, was Drake London coming out of college in half of the season. So, Drake London, Ted McMillan, I think McMillan deserves, depending on his team, of course, to be in the conversation of a top 20 rookie wide receiver, like top 20 overall as a rookie, and depending on his landing spot, could even grow from there. Just because I think, similar to Garrett Wilson from the year before, it's like, oh, we got tired of talking about Garrett Wilson, and we just know he's good. It's like everybody wanted to find somebody else to put into the conversation. He's clearly the best wide receiver. The only bad thing is, like, maybe he ends up at a spot like the Jaguars, so he's got Brian Thomas, and that's going to hurt his target share potential on a team like that. But even, like, let's just wish cast on a different team, but, like, let's just say that happens as of today. He ends up with Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas. He's still going to be a top 25, 30 wide receiver at worst, in my opinion. So to get him in round 6, again, his stock can basically, in my opinion, only go up from here. I actually think this is kind of like his worst case scenario range.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of last year, and I don't like Ted as much as I liked Malik Neighbors a year ago, but I remember having conversations last year saying, I really want to draft Neighbors where he's going, because I think this will be the cheapest you ever get him in his career. Like, yeah. I just was very certain of that. I feel similarly to Ted. If you're getting Ted in round 6, I really like him. I don't understand, like, where some of the hate and some of the him falling down draft boards is coming from. Like, I think I saw there was a mock draft a couple weeks ago. I think it might have been from McShay. It was from somebody who had the Ravens getting McMillan without trading up in like the late 20s. I find that baffling. I think he's
real quick to say about last year. Like, if we were ranking him with last year as of today, it would probably be obviously the top 2, but I would say Thomas now 3rd. And the way that we saw Marvin Harrison play his rookie season, I would almost make a case that McMillan's with Harrison, even potentially in front of him and Odunze at this point. He's top 5 if you even include last year's draft class, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I super agree too that, like, if the landing spot is good, then this even just goes up. Like, it's not going down with a quote unquote bad landing spot. I think this is around the floor. I think it can only go up, and I love the player, so I'm super on board with this. Fitz, what do you think about Ted?
Yeah, Worm, you and I do the Dynasty shows together. You know that Ted, for both of us, I think has been top 3 or top 2 guy in our overall Superflex ranking. So including, like above the quarterbacks, I think for both of us. So yeah, I like him. Redraft is sort of an interesting proposition though, because it's really hard to figure out where he's going to land and where we'd be excited about his landing spot. I mean, some of the teams I've thought of as possible fits, like the Saints and Seattle, I don't necessarily love as landing spots. So as a result, I've given him sort of this mincing Frady Cat redraft ranking at like wide receiver 33 or something like that, like right behind, oh man, who do I?
That's still way over consensus.
That is over consensus, which is weird because, like, Jake, I mean, I think most people would be delighted if come August they could get Ted McMillan in the 6th round. Like, I think I have a feeling his redraft ADP is going to settle somewhere higher than that. 5th. Maybe not, though. Like, if people are kind of spooked by wherever the landing spot turns out to be, if he's either paired with a suboptimal quarterback or if he's got target competition.
Well, here, let me do one. Can I steal your job here for a second, Worm? And I'll throw it to you too, because you obviously the rookies as well, but let's throw that out. You brought up the Saints. I don't think that's the worst case scenario. I think it's not great, but let's say Tet McMillan on the Saints or Zay Flowers, which everybody keeps trying to make happen as a top 25 wide receiver every single year. Which just don't care, but just straight up McMillan versus Flowers, because I would go McMillan in that case. I think Flowers, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because I think he's the number one on the Ravens, still ignoring how much Lamar shares it across the field, versus the clear number two, potentially even the number one over Olave with the Saints. I would just take that chance on McMillan. I'm just curious your guys' opinion on that.
I agree with your premise that Zay does tend to get overrated a bit in the rankings. I think I would still have Zay slightly ahead of Tet, but not by much. And with Worm, you're probably asking the wrong guy since he's a total Ravens homer.
I was gonna say, even as
that's
the
part
Ravens,
of the that's part of the
even as the Ravens fan, I actually think I would say Tet, because
Really?
the concussion history with Olave is super scary to me. So there's a real path to, I think, Tet being the number one in New Orleans if that's where he were to go. And listen, I'm no fan of Derek Carr, but I think he can at least support. If the guy's talented enough, I just feel like every year the best rookie receivers just consistently are undervalued in redraft leagues. It is every year it happens, and I believe Ted McMillan is the best rookie receiver, setting aside whatever Travis Hunter's usage is going to be. So if there are very few landing spots where I wouldn't be really excited about Ted.
Yeah. Well, and the Saints drew in my mind, the comparison to Brian Thomas last year is oh, well, he's going to a team. They brought in Gabe Davis. They have Christian Kirk, all this from the year before. Sorry. But the whole point being is oh, he's crowded. He's probably not even the number one from day one. And talent wins out at some point. So I just thought that was an interesting conversation.
I find it kind of interesting that I know Daniel Jeremiah has his top three wide receivers all ranked in a row in his big board, but he's actually got Matthew Golden one spot ahead of Tet, and then Egbuka behind both.
I'm
There's
not
another one.
Yeah,
Isaiah Bond was the best wide receiver in that team the entire time, and then it's Golden ran a 4.2. He's the best. Can we just stop?
I recognize that I am not as smart as somebody like Daniel Jeremiah. Having said that, I just don't understand the thought process to getting Golden ahead of Tet. I just think Tet's a better player from what I've watched, at least.
He's arguably not even the best wide receiver coming on the team he was just on.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, speaking of rookie seasons for guys, Fitz, you've got somebody coming off of a relatively disappointing rookie season, but who was very highly valued coming into drafts last year.
And who was a top 10 draft pick last year after a terrific college career at Washington. Rome Odunze, who is wide receiver 34, 76th overall in ECR. And Rome's rookie numbers weren't bad. 54 catches, 734 yards, 3 touchdowns. But there is considerable room for improvement, and I think reason to believe we're going to see that improvement this year. Odunze had to share targets with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen last year. Now Allen is presumably out of the picture, unlikely to be re-signed. Odunze was also working with a rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams, who, let's face it, was pretty mediocre as a passer, 6.3 yards per attempt, only 20 TD passes in 17 games. But there is reason to believe that Caleb Williams and the Bears offense are going to be better. New play caller with Ben Johnson, who's had a nice track record of success with the Lions, and also a much improved offensive line this year. I mean, the Bears have gone to great pains in free agency to rebuild that offensive line, which no doubt undermined Caleb and, as a result, Rome. So take the discount on Rome if you can get him in the 7th round this year, because I think we're going to see the same sort of second-year breakout that we got from JSN last year in Seattle.
Would you rather Fitz be drafting Rome Odunze or Tet this year?
Right now, I've got Rome one spot ahead of Tet.
Okay, what do you think about that, Jake?
I was going to say, after all that, I actually have Odunze over Tet as of today. Because I'm kind of playing the odds of it could go bad for McMillan depending on even worse situations potentially than the Saints. But I love Odunze. Like, that was one I saw on the list too. Is like I was like trying to figure out like, wait, which round could I potentially make him in for me? But credit to Fitz for pulling this one out. Like, the comparison to JSN is simple in the fact of like actually different wide receivers. You guys know, I actually called Rome Odunze bigger Garrett Wilson. Like, I think his play and his ability, like a lot like Garrett Wilson. He's just bigger, and almost as fast. And so if you think about that as the number 2, as you just brought up for Ben Johnson, and what exactly happened, and I love the JSN because of this. JSN went to the Seahawks behind DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, had a rough rookie season, and everybody's like, be patient because he's behind 2 good options, probably not going to get a lot. And what we saw in last year's draft, how far did JSN fall? And it's like exactly what we thought was going to happen happened, and everybody's got scared. Well, we said the exact same thing about Odunze. He's going in behind DJ Moore and Keenan Allen in a rookie offense, quarterback-wise. It's like, just be patient, expect more in year 2. Exact same thing happens, and now Odunze is falling down the draft boards again. It's like, we called it, and then people are still like, I don't know. So, yes, I actually have Odunze inside my top 30 wide receivers. I would take him over Addison to give you a comparison.
What do you think about that one, Fitz? Addison or Odunze?
Oh, man. Let me take a look here. I think I do have Addison. Oh, it's really close. I have Addison just ahead. Really close.
I think fewer questions with Odunze than you do at Addison at this point. And I know Addison has the track record, but he doesn't have the quarterback question. And whereas Odunze and Ben Johnson, and the thing I like you brought about Ben Johnson too is I think he'll get what we saw about Caleb Williams when they briefly made the court. So the coaching change to Thomas Brown, yay, got Caleb Williams to run a little bit, make quicker decisions, and then when Thomas Brown had to be forced to take over, completely kind of lost a little bit and kind of reverted back to like early season Caleb Williams. I think Ben Johnson's smart enough to be like, hey, let's make this offense and let me drill into Caleb Williams' head how to win in the NFL.
Yeah, there's a case that Odunze has better circumstances this year than Addison will, but at the same time, like we've seen Addison be pretty awesome in the NFL, and like if he had a little more room to run as far as targets, but like I have no doubt that Odunze is going to be awesome because when he was at Washington, I mean, if you threw a ball anywhere into his orbit, he vacuumed it up like a Roomba, basically. He was just put the ball anywhere close to Odunze and he was coming down with it.
Welcome to this week's Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like the athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible, business decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance that help you make an impact with safe, secure AI solutions. Players and teams are facing their own challenges. In this segment, we spotlight athletes or teams that are currently undergoing a challenge, what this means from a fantasy or betting standpoint, and examine how we think they can overcome them. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing the challenge faced by Rome Odunze coming off a disappointing year 1. Odunze was one of the elite wide receiver prospects in the epic 2024 NFL draft class, but his rookie season was a relative letdown given his draft capital. He caught just 54 passes on 101 targets, finishing with under 750 yards and just 3 touchdowns. After week 9, he failed to reach 50 yards in all but 2 games, and he finished as wide receiver 49 on the season. How can he overcome the challenge of bouncing back? It starts with new Bears head coach Ben Johnson and his creative play calling, plus hopefully a step forward from Caleb Williams in year 2 with a better offensive line. Odunze will also look to take a step forward himself and cement himself as one of the best second-year receivers in the league this year. That's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. I need to take a breath after that.
You should have done the Rome Odunze sales pitch for me, Worm, because I think you did a better job than I did. I should have just shut up and let you go.
Thanks to Microsoft for that. We'll let them know they did a good job with that. Round 8, Jake. Which wide receiver are you targeting here?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out a shout out. We did a few shows ago, the Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall situation with that's going on with the 49ers, and now the Brandon Ayuk news continues to pop up and sound a little bit more damning by the day. So if this continues to go that route, I would put Juwan Jennings here. But we already talked about him at length a few shows ago, so I wanted to kind of pivot off to one that you might look at me and say, hey, Jake, you told me this one, and then the draft happened, and screw you, I have to throw this out the window. But that's like, wait for the draft. Just wait a few more weeks to draft. Is that if McMillan doesn't go to the Saints, Rashid Shaheed, like, do we so quickly forget what he was pre-injury and just in this offense? And as a top 25 wide receiver was a gift. People were running away with the top of their leagues at the beginning of the season because of him. And I don't think he's, again, like a league winner in the fact of like, oh my God, he's going to be a top 20 wide receiver all year long. But if they don't do anything else in this offense with Chris Olave and everything, that you look at, can he put up the Devonta Smith kind of, maybe a little bit lesser in like that wide receiver 30 range where he wins you some weeks at 20-something points, but he will be quiet with 5 sometimes. But in a wide receiver 3, I'm willing to take shots on that because wide receiver 3s that get you that kind of upside is more than I want than the guy that's just going out there to churn out 8 points every single week. That doesn't win me as a wide receiver 3. The guy needs to have that surprise performance when maybe somebody else came up dead. So I think Shaheed at this point, it's coming off the injury, the uncertainty of this team as a whole. This is where I'd be willing to gamble on his potential.
What do you think about this one, Fitz?
I like it a lot because we were starting to get the breakout last year, and I think the injury came just before the full breakout, so that might keep the price low. There might even be a chance you can get him a little later than this. But I actually had Rashid Shaheed in the Scott Fish Bowl last year, and Scott Fish for the 2024 Fish Bowl gave very generous bonuses for return yardage. And I was getting like some really nice receiving games and some big return games from Rashid Shaheed. And I'm like, man, this guy's my MVP about 5 weeks into the season or until whenever he went down, unfortunately. But yeah, this guy is the real deal as the receiver. And he's maybe a little volatile, like he's big play centric. And I don't know if he's going to be checking in with 5 or 6 catches every week, but the catches he makes are going to be impactful ones. And I think down around here, like I would love to have Rashid Shaheed as like my wide receiver 4 this year.
I think I saw in some Scott Fish Bowl drafts with that scoring, he was going in like the 3rd round.
1-1.
Some of those.
He went. No, he went as the first pick
in one league.
He went as the first. Oh, I missed
and
that one.
Someone let me have him really late, like at the end of round 7 or something like that. And
he was all over the map and the return yards.
After I had him for a few weeks, I understood why someone took him 101. Like he was tremendously impactful in that scoring system.
Wow, I had missed that. That's wild. All right, Fitz, this is an interesting one. Round 9. We talked a little bit about this one before the show as well. What do you got here?
Stefon Diggs. And it will be interesting to see where his ADP settles because, number one, I mean, he's coming off a torn ACL, and we don't know exactly when he's going to be ready. Plus, he's 31 coming off a torn ACL. So could be ready to start the season, or maybe it's a handful of games into the season that he's ready to go. And the other thing, I mean, Jake just sort of mentioned Brandon Ayuk and the ambiguity with him. And we know that the Patriots have been rumored as a suitor for Brandon Ayuk, which would obviously affect Diggs' ADP if they wound up together. So on the other hand, as of now, Diggs is poised to be the go-to receiver for young Drake May, who was pretty impressive last season, even with just an awful supporting cast, including one of the worst wide receiver groups in the league. And when Diggs joined the Bills in 2020 after a nice stint with the Vikings, he helped a young Josh Allen make the jump from inconsistent young QB to superstar. Like that first season for Diggs in Buffalo, that was the breakout season for Josh Allen. And even though Diggs is a little older now, maybe he can help Drake May take a big step forward. So in the 9th round, assuming there's no Brandon Ayuk, and assuming we don't get bad news about the recovery time for Diggs, I think the price is right.
Jake?
Yeah, the interesting thing is we saw last year the big thing was like the yards per route run. He was down and his targets and everything like that. I think that was a victim of the situation too, just because of everything that went wrong with the Texans offense and no protection for CJ Stroud. But I pulled this up when they made this signing over the Athletic to pull it up. And so ESPN, as you guys know, have the open score now. And he actually saw an uptick in his open score last year over 2023, which was a much better season. And that's the interesting thing is that you go all the way back from 2019 to 2022, he had an 80-plus mark in that every single year and then fell off in 2023 and then jumped back up last year, even with the lost season, so to speak. So I really like this, even if you have to maybe wait a week or two. If it gets worse news, obviously we'll pivot on this one. But as of right now, This actually should only go up just because of the opportunity here. And oh, by the way, what does Mike Vrabel come from? Oh, it comes from that coaching situation, what did that team love? Wes Welker, Jacoby Myers. What is Stefon Diggs at this point of his career especially? Oh, just another guy who's just going to do a lot of damage in the intermediate game out of the slot and even potentially after the catch. So, yeah, I still like him as a wide receiver 3, and at this spot, this is pure value.
Where do you guys think he's going to be in August when it comes time to actually draft?
Ooh, if his injury, it sounds like the Ayuk situation is not happening. They don't draft somebody in the first round, maybe Hunter, McMillan, anything and they just they bring in somebody maybe the second day or something like that. I'm saying all that to say, and the injury is fine by week 1. He should probably jump back up into the top 25 potentially, just because of the volume alone, if nothing else, with Drake May.
Does that sound right to you, Fitz?
Yeah, top 25, top 30. I mean, I do think the Patriots are going to draft someone, but it might be a day 2 pick. It might be someone like Jack Bash or Amanor or Jalen Noel, someone like that. You know what I mean? It's not going to be anyone who's going to usurp Stefon Diggs as the number 1 target for Drake May. So, yeah, I mean, if you like May and if you buy into May as one of the better young QB prospects in the league, I think you should probably be buying Steph Diggs as a top 30 guy, top 25.
Let's go to round 10, Jake.
Yeah, so I'm trying to fill up my IR spot before we even start the season. And it's just look. The last 2 seasons have been very frustrating injury-wise for Christian Kirk, and it's funny we're just talking about the Stefon Diggs, but now Christian Kirk steps into clearly the number 2 situation with the Texans. The situation with Tank Dell, there's talk he might be lost for all of 2025. I know the Houston draft capital has actually increased a little bit from what they're able to do, and maybe they surprise us and do draft a wide receiver despite all their other needs. Offensive line, anybody. But I think the thing here is when you look at Kirk and being able to step in here and what they wanted to get from Stefon Diggs, and we just talked about that. And Kirk, when on the field the past 2 years, has still been Christian Kirk, which has been a wide receiver 3. And I bring all that up to say is injury risk, wide receiver 3 potential, all that aside, is that we're getting him around 10. Round 10, we're taking flyers and shots. If Christian Kirk is toast in week 2 is one of my early pickups, I'm dropping him. I'm okay with that, because if we get a healthy Christian Kirk and CJ Stroud gets any protection this year, this is somebody that everybody was going nuts for in drafts last year as a top 5 quarterback, coming off what he did as a rookie with 4,000 plus yards. If we get any semblance of that offense again, and Christian Kirk's the number 2, he should be like if you said that was the scenario, his value would be around 7 draft costs. So round 10, you're absorbing all the risk and just saying it's all upside from here. You don't have to worry about it if he's all off season.
Fitz, where do you have Kirk ranked?
I have got Kirk ranked wide receiver, and I'm going to have to do some tweaking here because right now he's ranked a little too far down. Right now I've got him in the 50s, but I'm going to bring him up. I need to have him higher for sure. Because I do like the situation. Last year we were worried about the sort of 3 receiver logjam they appeared to have with Nico and Diggs and Dell. And as Jake said, obviously Diggs is gone, and I really doubt that Dell is going to play this year, or at least certainly not before December. So all of a sudden, the path to targets is a little more clear for the remaining guys, and Kirk is going to be paired with this terrific young QB. The reason it didn't work out for Stroud last year wasn't year 2 regression on Stroud's part. It was an offensive line that just couldn't block for him. One of the worst pass blocking O-lines in the league. I do wish that they had taken steps to address that so far this year instead of actually trading the best lineman they did have with Laramie Tunsil. There's still time for them to fix it in the draft, although I would worry about any offensive line with 3 rookies starting for CJ Stroud. So I still have my concerns with that passing game, but I do think Kirk is positioned for a nice comeback season after the injury marred 2024.
Yeah, I feel like he's somebody that I will end up taking a lot of swings on in my drafts this year. Especially if the ADP and kind of those early rankings stay where they are.
Here,
It's hard.
Another one for you.
Yeah, who you got?
Both injury situations. one with a clearly less frustrating quarterback situation, but both considerations with their offense. Would you guys take a swing on Pittman or Kirk? Because I think at the same cost, I would take the swing on Kirk because he's got C.J. Stroud, where the Pittman is even the number one at this point with Downs, and who's the quarterback? Is it like I think we're saying like it's an open competition with quotes, but if Anthony Richardson really does continue to fall on his face and it's Daniel Jones, like I'm not going to be too excited about Josh Downs or Michael Pittman.
I mean, I like Pittman, the player, better, but I think the quarterback alone, you'd have to give the edge to Kirk. Fitz.
I mean, I've got Pittman ranked higher, but that is an interesting thought exercise. And now that Jake is posing the question, I realize they're probably separated by a little too much in my rankings, and I either have to move Pittman down or Kirk up or a combination of both.
Fitz, let's stick with you for round 11.
All right. Let's stay in the AFC East. It's Keon Coleman. And this was someone, Worm, I know I was excited about a year ago. In the 11th odds, I think we're getting, in the 11th round, I think we're getting the right odds to bet on a second-year breakout for Keon Coleman. You just kind of have to understand what you're getting. He is not going to be a high-volume receiver, but Keon Coleman can be a big play receiver. He's sort of in the George Pickens phylum. His ball skills are fantastic. Dude is a big 6'4" rebounder. He did briefly play basketball for Tom Izzo at Michigan State, Worm. Just in case you thought we were going to keep Big Ten basketball out of the show. So yeah, he was at Michigan State, did play on the basketball team for 1 year before transferring to Florida State, and Keon Coleman does play above the rim. Only 29 catches in 13 games last year, but he averaged 19.2 yards per catch and 9.8 yards per route run. The Bills didn't really add much at wide receiver in the offseason. They signed Josh Palmer, but they did not re-sign Amari Cooper. And Keon is still only 21 years old. Like, he doesn't turn 22 until May. There is ample growth potential here, and it certainly doesn't hurt that Keon gets to play with Josh Allen.
Second-year receiver, Jake, that's a profile I tend to be interested in, especially somebody who has a degree of pedigree and talent paired with this great quarterback, like what Fitz was saying. And round 11, that seems like a pretty good, value to me and a risk I'm worth taking a swing on.
Yeah, I'll take a swing on him here, mostly. So I called them like the Charles Dickinson, the Tale of Two Cities or Tale or whatever. What's the name? That's Tale of Two Cities? I can't. Yeah. The best of times, the worst of times, because I called him the best of Kenny Golladay, the worst of Kenny Golladay. That's where I was going with it. Like, and you saw both of those last year, and that's really what it was. Is like you saw like Kenny. We joked about Kenny Golladay at the end of his career, especially with the Giants, but there were some really good seasons. I know some of that was the offense, and some of that was the quarterback play with Stafford and everything like that. But Kenny Golladay could play ball for a couple of years. But the concerns, and that's why I drew the parallel to Keon Coleman, is that profile wide receiver has a really deep floor if things don't go right, or if some of it's the wide receiver in his own innate self struggles on the field. So we saw the both of that. I still think there's better for Keon Coleman. I think the best days of Kenny Golladay are in play for Keon Coleman. And in round 11, like if you got Kenny Galladay's good seasons around 11, you'd be doing victory laps for the entire season. So I am more than willing to take that chance in this range because that's still in play. Like I just wanted to bring up the fact, like the concerns, don't be off put by the concerns because that's kind of what we expected, or at least I expected kind of going out of college.
And it's built into the price, right? I mean, this is time of the draft where you want to take a swing. It's upside. That's the play. Yeah. Speaking of upside, a player that I really like, and I know Fitz agrees. We talked about him a lot in the Dynasty show. Round 12, Jake, take us home.
So going back to what I said about the drafts and these rookies, and I'm going back to like, and it always has to be Ohio State wide receivers for some reason. It happened with Smith-Njigba, happened with Garrett Wilson. Is like, we just get tired of them being good. Like, that's what Emeka Egbuka. Like, what is the problem with not liking him? Like, he is tier 2. He is somebody that I'm sitting here long and hard. You'll find out by the time my article comes out about kind of putting him in that Brian Thomas 1.5-ish range. Like, is he tier 2 or is he just kind of like, he's so good and we got so tired of him just being good that maybe he deserves to kind of almost be in the conversation with Tech McMillan. And I think that's the biggest thing is people get exhausted of players being good. They want to find the next hot thing. Matthew Golden, you brought him up earlier. And it just like, but what Egbuka does is he can go to any team's offense, anyone, all 32 teams, and he can step in as the number 2. Is he an NFL number 1? I don't think so, but that's okay. You know who I didn't think was a number 1, and we saw that happen? Anquan Boldin. What happened when Anquan Boldin was asked to be the number 1? Kind of fell apart. He was a great 1B, but just okay. Like some wide receivers are like that. Honestly, Garrett Wilson's probably best as a 1B. We just saw that. But that 1B on a lot of teams can put up top 20, 25 numbers. We talked about the Devonta Smiths, and I'm not making that as a player comp. I'm just saying we're talking about Devonta Smiths and all these 2s that do really well in fantasy on their teams. Of course, you slap Egbuka on the Browns, and I'm like, damn it, don't talk to me ever again. But on most teams, he can go out there and put up those kind of Devonta Smith type numbers, even though that's not the same player comp that I would make for him.
Fitz?
Super safe floor with Egbuka, probably the safest floor of any of the rookie receivers. And what you almost like about him, and I think, Jake was talking about this with Egbuka profiling as a wide receiver too. This is a guy who has come out of a program where he has been playing with other great receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith, who's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick in 2027. And Egbuka was like still an impactful player with these other great receivers around him. So, yeah, I mean, I love the guy. I think he's just a ready-made slot receiver. I think he could have a very Jaxon Smith-Njigba-like career, but you've got to draft JSN in the 3rd round this year. You can get rookie Egbuka in a double-digit round. Oh, and by the way, about Kenny Golladay, like he was truly a really good receiver in Detroit, and it wasn't all QB related. Because I remember that year where Stafford got hurt and David Blau had to make like 5 or 6 starts.
Oh, yeah, that's a good, really good
and
point.
Kenny Golladay was actually a wide receiver 1 over those 5 or 6 games.
Do you, Fitz, have a favorite landing spot that's realistic for Egbuka that you'd like to see him go?
I know a lot of people have paired him up with Pittsburgh, who needs a slot receiver. I mean, that might seem excessive considering they don't have a quarterback solution yet, and they've got 2 outside receivers who already might be bickering for the ball. So like that's the one you hear a lot. I mean, I would certainly welcome him to the Green Bay Packers with open arms. I know they've got Jaden Reed, but like you could play Jaden Reed at Z or Egbuka at Z and fit both of those guys.
I actually think there's a great spot, honestly.
You like that Packers one?
Yeah. No, I think the Giants.
Oh,
put him alongside Malik Neighbors, and hopefully Jameis wins that quarterback battle. Like,
yeah.
But even if not, like Russ can do enough to make, like, obviously that caps the ceiling, but like that's what they need. Like Wan'Dale Robinson, great as a number 3 slot kind of gadgety guy, and Darius Slayton, one of the more shocking contracts that happened this offseason. But a number 3, as in like that Nate Washington, you go deep, it's cool, you get some big plays, but there is no answer for a 2 right now on that team.
I can't say I'd love to fit with Russ, but I love the fit in that receiver room. Yep. I think he's an ideal match there.
You can look at Tennessee if they go Cam Ward and put him alongside Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I can see that one. Yeah,
Denver,
kind of like that. Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. Quick recap for everybody. All the receivers we talked about today: Brian Thomas Jr. in round 1, then Tyreek Hill, JSN, Chris Godwin, Devonta Smith, Tet McMillan, Rome Odunze, Rashid Shaheed, Stefon Diggs, Christian Kirk, Keon Coleman, and Emeka Egbuka. We will wrap it up there. Those are the wide receivers we are drafting in every round. If you missed last week's episode, go check that out too. We did the same thing, but for the running backs as well. For Jake and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.